with all the information going around out there about buyer agency agreement and new real estate laws, there's so many people with so many questions, and they're valid questions, and it's really important to know. So I'm going to help explain all this. So a lot of people think everything's totally different and nothing's the same and this changes everything. It doesn't really change that much, to be honest. So if you're a buyer and you want to go look for houses and you push a button on Zillow that says call a preferred agent, that agent knows nothing about the house, and they're not the list agent. They are a buyer's agent, and when they meet you, they're going to ask you to sign a contract. What that contract says is that you understand that you're going to show them this house. You cannot go in the house until you've had this agreement signed and in hand. So remember that. You cannot tour a house without having a buyer agency agreement with a realtor. So you're going to have this agent show you this house, and it also shows for how long. Maybe you're going to be in agreement that this agent's going to represent you for one showing or for two showings or for 7 days or whatever. But it also states that there's a 3% commission that is expected to be paid upon closing. So of course, right out of the gate, everybody says, 3% of what? 3% of the purchase price. Okay, so if you are buying a $300,000 house, so the house is $300,000, you're going to put an offer on it, that's the purchase price, and the buyer agency agreement also states that you're going to pay the buyer agent 3%. However, that doesn't mean you really have to pay them 3%. Let me explain how. If I write an offer for a property and it's $300,000, I'm going to send in all kinds of stuff. Purchase agreement, seller's disclosure, lead-based paint if required, and all kinds of stuff. Pre-approval letter, whatever. But the new thing that has to go with that offer is going to be a form called buyer request for seller to pay buyer agent. I might request 3%, and that's probably what I'm going to start with because everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable now. So it's not a set fee that's listed on the MLS anymore. That's what's different. We can't list on there that the seller is going to offer 3% or 2.75 or 2.5% to the buyer agent. It's literally part of the negotiation. So depending on the circumstances, if there are no other offers, house has been on the market for a few weeks and you're the only person offering, we're going to feel pretty comfortable that they may counter our price. They may counter some of the other things, but one of the things they can counter now is the buyer agency commission, the buyer agent commission, and that is commonly called BAC. They may not counter on anything in that offer except the BAC. So they may counter back and say, we'll pay them 2.5%. So basically at this point, that counter offer of 2.5% for the BAC is going to be between me and the buyer now. Does the buyer want to pay the other 0.5%? Do they even have the other 0.5%? So it's really going to depend. The buyer, you may very well want to let your agent know up front, hey, I can pay up to $1,500, but that's it. So if I know that up front, then I'm going to request 3 and then try to work it out and get it to where you don't have to pay anything. But sometimes in multiple offer situations, that's not the case. 3 weeks ago, there were 23 offers on a house that a client of mine wanted to offer on, and we did win that offer. I'm very good at winning the offer. But what we had to do is make sure that the sellers were going to have the most money possible at the end of the closing over any other buyer. And one of the ways that we worked that out was he had a lot of cash. So he was able to say, hey, instead of putting this much down, I'll just put this much down so I can make sure I pay you. So we removed the buyer agent commission request from that particular offer because he knew if they don't have to pay me, they're saving a ton of money. So and he just put $9,000 less down on the house to pay me. So out of 7 times, I think, that I've already been in this situation since this started a month ago, only 1 time that I have to have the buyer pay. But that's because he really wanted the house and there were 23 offers. So the best thing to do, and especially right now, houses are sitting on the market longer, they're willing to negotiate. If they're only willing to pay 1.5%, we can also say, okay, you can only pay 1.5%, but then we want to ask you for $5,000 in closing costs that the buyer can use any way they want to use. And that means that the buyer is going to get $5,000 at closing, and that's how you can come up with the other portion to pay your agent, because the agent was smart enough to ask for seller concessions. So that's how that works. And if I'm your agent, you don't even have to worry about it. I got you. We're going to negotiate this out, and I'm going to do everything possible so that you don't have to pay anything out of your pocket, and we're going to get it out of that seller.